Today we're looking at a laptop with an RTX 5080, a latest gen Intel processor, 32 gig of memory, and a design that doesn't make it look like it's about to try and return to Cybertron. The Gigabyte Gaming A16 Pro, a 16-inch gaming laptop that's aiming to give you proper top-tier performance without a top-tier price tag. Let's see if it delivers on that aim, or if it's just another AI-enhanced laptop pretending to be clever. Hi guys, I'm Matt and welcome to Kit Guru. So let's start with the pricing then, as we always do. The pricing is around $2,200, which is the price that was given to me in the information sent across from Gigabyte when I started looking at this thing for the review. It's a bit of a challenge finding this exact spec in the UK though, so we're going to have to use that Trump token pricing for now. That pricing for an RTX 5080 laptop though puts it just under most of the competition. 5080 laptops here in the UK usually start at around £2,300, there or thereabouts. I guess what Gigabyte are aiming for here is quite simple. It's a 5080 gaming laptop that you can get for cheaper than from any of the competition. And I can appreciate that, to be honest. Times are hard, and even though this is still expensive in the grand scheme of things, saving a bit of money if you're after a laptop like this is always nice. But where are the compromises? Here's the full rundown of the specs. The CPU is an Intel Core 7 240H, which sports 10 cores and 16 threads, built with 6 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores. The P cores run at a base clock speed of 2.5 GHz and can boost up to 5.2 GHz, while the efficiency cores run at 1.8 GHz and can boost up to 4 GHz. As for power, the base usage is listed at 45 watts by Intel, while the maximum turbo power usage can hit 115 watts on paper. The GPU then is the RTX 5080 Mobile, likely the reason you've clicked on this review or are considering picking up this laptop. It contains 16 gig of GDDR7 VRAM and all the NVIDIA features like DLSS 4, frame gen, dedicated 4th generation ray tracing cores, reflex, basically everything that NVIDIA have invented over the past few years. And taking a quick look in NVIDIA control panel, we can see that Gigabyte have set the RTX 5080 to use a maximum of 115 watts as confirmed here in NVIDIA control panel. As for memory, we have 32 gig of LPDDR5X running at 5600 megatransfers. This is soldered memory, so there's no upgrade path sadly, and when testing it with Ada, it recorded read speeds of 62,831 megabytes per second and write speeds of 79,087 megabytes per second. So it's not notably faster than the usual DDR5 memory that I test. It'll perform about the same, with the added downside of not being able to upgrade it if you want to. For storage, we have two 1TB PCIe 4.0 M.2 SSDs occupying the 2 M.2 slots found on the board inside the laptop, so any future upgrades would have to replace one of the already installed drives. When I cracked the laptop open to get some snazzy B-roll and find out the exact model numbers to tell you, I found out they were very, very well shielded. So rather than ripping that shielding off, we're going to have to rely on model information from Windows. And both of the drives are Kingston OM8SGP41024K2-COO drives. Absolutely great name in there, Kingston, well done. They're pretty standard Gen 4 drives, and testing them both with Crystal Disk Mark returned some very different results. However, the C drive measured 7,100 megabytes per second read and 6,494 megabytes per second write, whereas the D drive, as they were set up when the laptop was sent out to me, that measured around half of that speed, coming in at 3,560 megabytes per second and then 3,289 megabytes per second respectively. Looking in BIOS, there's no way to change the speed of the M.2 slots or configure what generation PCIe they're using. Not that I can see anyway. So in my curious flurry of tinkering, I swapped the drives over and tested them again. And lo and behold, the speed swapped over. So one of those M.2 slots is operating at a much slower speed than the other one, probably at PCIe Gen 3. And there's no way to change it in BIOS, which is a bit of a big oof on Gigabyte's part. Moving on to talk about the display then, it's fine, it's nothing special, but then it's nothing awful either. It's okay, I'm a bit indifferent towards it. It's a 16-inch IPS panel running at 2560 by 1600 with a 165 Hz refresh rate. There's plenty of sharpness and smooth motion for gaming or a bit of Netflix. It just doesn't blow me away. Brightness is decent and it definitely does the job, but then like it lacks the depth and contrast when you compare it to an OLED panel. But then it's not an OLED panel, so it's kind of a pointless comparison. But after you've looked at one, you go to looking at a screen like this, it's just not as impressive. It's good enough, it's just not the kind of screen that's going to make you stop mid-game and admire the view and say wow. The keyboard, I feel the same way about that. The keyboard's all right, it's nothing groundbreaking, but it does the job. You get single zone RGB lighting, controllable through Gigabyte's GIMate software, and then you get up to 1.7mm of key travel, which does give a decent bit of feedback when you're typing or gaming. It's an okay keyboard, it's just nothing amazing. It's got the usual laptop style layout. The arrow keys are tiny and feel a bit cramped, but overall it's decent. The power button, that's one highlight I suppose. That sits just above the keyboard and it's not integrated into the function row and waiting for you to accidentally press it and just ruin your day and turn the laptop off or put it in sleep mode when you didn't want to. The trackpad, that's decent in size and in accuracy, to be honest, though the clicks do feel a little bit hollow. It's fine for everyday use though, but if we're honest, if you game on a laptop, you're going to plug a proper mouse in within about 5 seconds anyway, but when you use it out and about and on the go, the trackpad's okay. The laptop has a pretty standard selection of ports. On the left, you've got the power and networking alongside HDMI 2.1, a USB A 3.2 Gen 1 and a USB-C 3.2 Gen 1 that also supports DisplayPort 1.4 and Power Delivery 3.0. And then over on the right, there's another USB Type A 3.2 Gen 1, a USB Type A 2.0 and a 3.5mm audio jack for headset or headphones. One thing to note, and I think is a bit of a downside, the charger plugs in on the left-hand side as I mentioned, and it can get in the way when you're using the laptop and you haven't got it on a desk. I prefer it when they're along the back side and out of the way. And then for wireless networking, you've got Wi-Fi 6 and of course Bluetooth for connecting controllers and stuff like that if you need to, and other things, speakers, phones, whatever. I think overall connectivity, I think it's quite practical and it covers most everyday needs that I can think of. I would like to have seen an SD card reader and perhaps a Thunderbolt port or two, but they're going for budget 5080 laptops, so we can't have everything.
Looking to buy a gaming PC? Then you need to visit Cyberpunk PC. We'll help you with the best spec at a price you'll love. With us, you get 5 years warranty, a lifetime of technical support, and systems built by experts. So it's no wonder so many gamers choose Cyberpunk PC.
The battery's rated at 76 watt hours and the laptop comes with a pretty chunky 240 watt charger, and I tested that battery performance with an hour of video playback with the screen at about 50% brightness. First of all, using the power saving profile, and it drained about 15% of the battery after an hour. When moving over to the balance profile, running that same test again, video at 50% brightness, after that hour long, the drain increased to roughly 17%. Honestly, that's pretty good on both profiles. If you game without the charger plugged in though, which will obviously drain the battery much faster, after an hour of Cyberpunk 2077 on the gaming profile, the battery level sat at around 10%. That's a huge difference. The 5080 ate well. And that gaming test was with the laptop using the 5080 for graphics. By default, it's set to use the integrated GPU and turn eco mode on the display when you run on battery power, and that's even when you're in the gaming profile. You can tinker with that sort of stuff in the GIMate software that I mentioned, and I'll cover in more detail in a little bit. The built-in webcam can capture video at 1080p 30 FPS, and it's about as good as you'd expect, which roughly translates to it being about as good as a phone camera from 2010. Sound is handled by a pair of 2-watt speakers positioned under the chassis on the front left and right corners, and they're okay, I suppose. They're completely devoid of any real bass, and they have that tinny laptop speaker sound, but they do get decently loud without any real horrible levels of distortion appearing. They're okay, but I wouldn't use them if I valued audio quality at all. That goes for all laptops, not just this one. All laptops that I've tried anyway. As for the actual design and looks of the A16 Pro, it looks like your pretty run-of-the-mill 16-inch gaming laptop that's had its gaming tackiness toned down a little bit. It has got a bit here and there, like the gaming 16 branding. It's got a Gigabyte logo on the lid. It's mostly plastic with a bit of metal for the trackpad. The weight is around 2.3 kilograms, so it's not the lightest laptop in the world, but actually handling and carrying it isn't too bad. It'll easily fit in a bag and be luggable, for lack of a better word. The hinges, they open up to 180 degrees and they feel okay on the most part. One-handed opening and closing isn't the greatest thing in the world. The laptop does tend to slide around a little bit when you try and open it with one hand, but on the most part, they're okay. The overall build quality is okay. There is a little bit of flex in the lid. It's not the most solid unit I've ever had my hands on, but it's decent enough. It doesn't feel cheap, it just doesn't feel extremely premium either. There's no creakiness, and the keyboard deck, even though it does flex a little bit when you push down on it, when you actually type on it and use it for its intended purpose, it feels all right. The venting for what Gigabyte call their WindForce Infinity EX cooling system is on the back and the sides. You've got two inlets on the sides and then two exhausts on both the sides and the back, so you don't get blasted with hot air out of the front. We'll take a look at some thermal footage and listen to what it sounds like when it gets going and the fans ramp up a little bit later on. Before we take a look at game performance then, I'll just run through what I've done to prepare the laptop. I've done the usual stuff, updated Windows, which I do on everything, and then updated the GPU drivers as the laptop arrived with NVIDIA Studio drivers from April 2025 installed. But then a little side note to that, this wasn't a brand new laptop when I got it. It was a review sample, so I'm guessing the game ready drivers would be installed if you picked one up brand new. And also, I'll quickly mention Gigabyte's Gigabyte software. Just like everything else at the moment, it goes heavy on the AI, and it's kind of useful, I guess, for very basic stuff. There's an AI-based chat assistant that can change basic settings for you, but if you ask it anything more complex than really simple questions, then it'll kind of crap the bed pretty easily. I asked it to tell me how the laptop was currently set up, expecting it to tell me what mode and what power settings are selected, and it just couldn't do it. And then you've got Gigabyte Creator, because every tech company in the world is hellbent on taking every bit of a human touch out of the stuff we make. Basically, this will help you make stuff and create stuff with the help of AI. When setting it all up, it'll take you through to Hugging Face, not a creepy name at all, where you can set up local LLMs and go AI crazy if you want to. This review is more focused on the hardware and the laptop itself though, but the AI stuff is all there and it's all an option if you want to. Aside from that, Gigabyte software is where you're going to go to adjust the power profiles, the cooling, the RGB, all of that good stuff. There are 5 profiles, or preset profiles to choose from: gaming, balanced, creator, power saving and online meeting mode. They're all customizable to a certain extent, but you cannot set custom power limits in either the software or the BIOS, which is a bit disappointing. I've tested all of the games you're about to see using the gaming profile with the charger plugged into the laptop, which will use the dedicated GPU, and it sets the CPU power limits of 70 watts for PL1 and 82 watts for PL2. That's quite a way under the 115 watt max turbo power use of the CPU as listed by Intel. It likely won't be an issue when gaming, but it's a usual case of laptop chips doing laptop things. Speaking of gaming, let's see how it goes, shall we? All of the following tests were at native 2560 by 1600 resolution with no ray tracing and using DLSS and FrameGen where I specify in the voiceover. Kicking things off with Cyberpunk 2077 then, running at maximum settings through this car chase scene at the beginning of the game. The FPS meter sat at around 40 to 50 with frame time coming in at roughly 23 milliseconds. Turn on DLSS at the performance preset and that'll see the frame rate roughly double, hitting the mid-90s at points during that same scene. And then finally add some multi-frame gen on top of that and it'll push the FPS meter up to north of 200, sometimes reaching the high 220s. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, running at max settings and native resolution, manages to maintain performance north of 60 FPS for pretty much the entirety of this opening section that I used for testing. Honestly, that's pretty impressive considering that everything is turned up to 11. DLSS only manages to provide a very small gain in this title on the A16 Pro though. FPS increases by around 20% roughly, although that margin does increase when you move to some swordplay as opposed to the crossbow at the start of the test, with the FPS meter hitting around 75 to 80 at times when on the ramparts. A Plague Tale Requiem, which is a fairly graphically demanding game, saw performance of around 60 FPS at max settings and native resolution, although I wouldn't go as far as to call it a solid 60 FPS, as the meter did dip down into the low 50s at times. Again, DLSS helps push the frame rate a bit, running through the same section saw an increase up to around 90, sometimes briefly hitting 100 FPS. Moving on to some rasterised performance with Counter-Strike 2 then, again running at native resolution and maximum settings, and the FPS meter was a decent bit north of 100 FPS, reaching 120 at times. Like I've said in previous videos, this isn't the sort of numbers that serious Counter-Strike players would be looking for, but for casual gamers it'll be plenty. Forza Horizon 5 next, running at native resolution and maximum settings, performance sat comfortably around 90 FPS with the occasional dip down into the low 80s during heavier scenes. It was a smooth and playable experience and kind of what you'd expect from the hardware in this laptop. Turn on DLSS at the performance preset and it doesn't change things dramatically at all. There is a small bump in performance up to around 100 FPS most of the time, and the frame times stay consistent. If you flip on frame gen in this title though alongside that DLSS, and then you're going to look at an increase up to around 130 to 140, which does make the game look a good bit more fluid and a bit more smooth. Hogwarts Legacy at native resolution and max settings managed around 50 to 60 FPS, which isn't bad really given how heavy this game can be on both the CPU and the GPU. When you turn on DLSS, again at the performance preset, it doesn't really do much in this title either. Frame rates remain pretty much the same, hovering between 50 and 60. But enabling DLSS performance and 4x multi-frame gen, then obviously you're going to see the frame rate absolutely skyrocket. It shot up to nearly 200 FPS. You're a wizard, Jensen. And finally, Marvel Rivals, at native resolution and max settings, it runs at around 40 to 50 FPS, which isn't amazing, and you will notice the dips when things get busy and you're fighting in this game. Enabling DLSS performance preset bumps that up to around 50 to 60 FPS, which is a kind of small but a welcome improvement in a title like this. You want it to be as fast and fluid as possible. And then you turn on multi-frame gen, and just like in all the other games we use multi-frame gen, the FPS counter absolutely skyrockets again, this time reaching around 180. I get latency could be an issue, but I suppose it's a compromise. To get those higher frame rates, you're going to have to deal with a little bit of latency, so it swings and roundabouts. You've got to weigh up which one you want. I'd rather play at a higher frame rate because my human latency will far outweigh the latency added by frame gen, I think, but maybe that's just me. I'm a bit of a washed up boomer gamer. Moving on to look at some CPU performance during some Cinebench sustained stress tests then. I ran the laptop through 30-minute tests on R23 Cinebench on both single core and multi-core, and using both the balanced and the gaming profiles then. Starting off with the gaming profile in the multi-core test, the P cores initially boost up to 5.2 GHz before becoming very quickly dialed back to around 4.8 GHz. The CPU temperature during that time quickly rises to around 95 degrees, which then sees further reductions to clock speeds, with most of the P cores dropping to around 3.7 GHz. As I said earlier, it's laptop chips doing laptop things. CPU package power use during this multi-core run peaked at 80 watts, but then it averages at around 43 watts by the end of the 30-minute test. Moving into single core stress testing then, and things are handled marginally better, a bit better. The P core clock speeds maintain 5.2 GHz for the entirety of the run, which was nice to see, but the CPU temperature still peaks again at around 95 degrees. CPU package power use here peaked at 48 watts and then averaged just 17 watts over the course of the 30-minute run. Using the balanced profile throughout those same tests then, and multi-core clock speeds were a bit lower, which is to be expected. They peaked at around 4.5 GHz and averaged around 3.4 GHz. The CPU package temperature though, That hit a pretty concerning 99 degrees, and power use was marginally higher, which was surprising considering the balance profile is supposed to be less performant than the gaming profile. It peaked at around 82 watts and then averaged around 50 watts. Single core performance using the same balance profile saw the same 4.5 GHz peaks to the peak or clock speed, with the CPU temperature hitting 77 degrees at its highest point, which is much less concerning and much more pleasing to see. 77 degrees is a lot better. Power use hit 40 watts during the boost phases and then averaged 19 watts by the end of the test. So not much different to the gaming profile apart from the temperature on the single core performance, but that multi-core performance in the balance profile was a bit weird. Overall, much of what could be expected, and it's kind of like following a similar pattern to what I've seen from all of the Intel mobile chips that I've tested over the past few years. Gaming in Cyberpunk 2077 using the gaming profile sees the 5080 hit a peak temperature of roughly 80 degrees on both the GPU and the memory temperature sensors. Here's some thermal footage showing how that heat transfers to the keyboard deck and what it's like to use it and the heat when you've got it, especially if you've got it sitting on your lap. And then after that, a few clips of the noise put out by the laptop when it's under load. So there we have it then, that was my full review of the Gigabyte A16 Pro. So I think performance wise, the RTX 58 and the Intel 7240H, they handled modern games well, pretty well, not amazing, but they definitely will. It'll play anything you chuck at it. I suppose if someone just wants to pick one up and play, then it's going to work for that. Aside from that frame gen issue in Plague Tale, that is. The 32 gig of memory will be plenty for most people, and storage is decent at 2 TB, and is fast for the most part, although one of the M.2 slots running at half the speed, even though the specs state that both slots are Gen 4, is something that you have to bear in mind. When you put it under some serious kind of stress, the CPU under some serious stress, it does the usual laptop thing and gets very, very hot very quickly. The design and the build, they're functional, not flashy, but not fragile either. A bit of flex in the lid, the usual laptop style keyboard with cramped arrow keys and the trackpad that's fine for casual use but you'd never use for gaming. Nothing here is gonna blow your socks off, but it all works. The left side charging port can get in the way if you're not at a desk, and I'd have liked some SD card reader slot and maybe some Thunderbolt port action, but other than that, the I/O is okay for most people. Battery life was good on the non-gaming task, but obviously if you game on the 5080 without it being plugged in, that graphics card's going to absolutely chug the battery faster than you can imagine. Thermals, as I mentioned a second ago, they can be an issue when you really push the processor, but they're okay when you're gaming. Ultimately, this is a laptop aimed at giving you top-tier performance without the top-tier price, as I said at the start of the video. And although it's not perfect and it does make some compromises, I think it does achieve that. So if you want a 5080 laptop that's a bit cheaper than the competition, it's kind of hard to argue that Gigabyte haven't delivered what they set out to. It's worth it if you find it at the right price. Just be aware of the little quirks and you'll have a solid gaming machine in return. And that's the end of the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave us a like down below if you did. Don't forget to subscribe to Kit Guru to keep up with the latest PC gaming news and reviews. And if you go down below this video, you'll find links to our merch store where you can pick yourself up a t-shirt like this. And then in the video's description, you'll find links to our Discord server, our Patreon page, and our website if you want to check any of that stuff out. Anyway, guys, I've been Matt. This has been the Gigabyte A16 Pro gaming laptop. I'll speak to you in the next one. Look after yourselves. See you later.